look, I'm not trying to win an argument with you. I just want to convince you that we're not as crazy as you think we are. But they were wonderful and are wonderful people and deserve better than a kangaroo court that they will go into when you have a citizen review board, besides which the Mercury News omitted mentioning that there are a few laws in the way, like the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights, like the California Constitution that guarantees a right to privacy. So the law essentially says that non-police officers cannot have access to these personnel investigations of the police. Now, we live in a democracy, and by definition, in a democracy, civilians control the military and the police. None of the police or military object to that at all, and in fact, that's the way it works. My boss as police chief, and it's still true in San Jose, was the city manager. The city manager's boss was the city council. In addition to that, the city of San Jose had an independent ombudsman who could look into police complaints. He happened to be a retired Marine of Latino descent, and he was hated and vilified by some people in the community and kind of dismissed in the Mercury News. But my view, he was not only a Marine hero, he was a quiet guy, and he was a real hero in the way he didn't bend over favoring the police or paying any attention to his critics. He simply did his job as it should have been done. So when you see the Mercury News pushing for this, it's become an obsession. I finally did an op-ed piece, which I think was partially the reason for my invitation to speak tonight, which I greatly appreciate. In response to the Mercury running a series of stories talking about the police arresting people for public drunkenness. Well, what are they supposed to do? It's against the law. And for using force. Do you ever try and put yourself in some policeman's mind when you handcuff someone who doesn't want to be handcuffed? Do you know how difficult that is? You have your handcuffs in one hand, and the other arm you're trying to control someone, and you're carrying a weapon that can be used to kill you. I study this stuff, and about 10 to 15% of the police officers murdered every year are murdered with their own weapons. And this is how sudden it can be. In what looks like a wrestling match, maybe on a videotape, it actually turns out to be a life and death struggle. And the Mercury had a series of headings: police caught on tape, police investigating brutality, all of these headlines and stories basically convicting San Jose police of misconduct and brutality and racism without any facts to substantiate that. In other words, it was a trial without due process, which does tremendous damage, because who suffers the most when the police hesitate to do their duty, when the police are slow in responding? The minority community. That's where most of the crime occurs and most of the victims are. And the decent people that I met in Harlem were so deprived of police protection that it was a terrible thing to see. And yet the police really need cooperation from that community, first of all, to report a crime in progress, secondly, to be a witness if necessary, and thirdly, if they're on the jury, to at least be impartial and not be automatically suspicious of the police. And so those stories in the Mercury News hurt, because I know how hard the police work. The beat officers on up work going to community meetings, meeting with people, listening to their complaints. And it's a different police department than it was in 1976 when I came. This is a police department that is probably the most representative of the population of any large city police department in the country. And I think it's probably the most highly regarded large city police department in the country. Despite this, the Mercury used perhaps 40,000 words in their series attacking the San Jose Police Department. And on the last day of the year, December 31st, they ran another editorial, repeating all of the material that they had already published. And on the first day of the new year, they ran another op-ed saying, we need a police review board in San Jose. So I think in the end it would import Oakland's crime rate into San Jose if it ever becomes law, and I trust because of people like you it will not. If you put it up to a vote of the people in the cities of California, despite the political imbalance, I think the people overwhelmingly would vote against these kind of citizen review boards. I just want to say one other thing. The police are going to be much more important. Much more is being asked of them now than ever before, because we have somewhere around 800,000 state and local police officers in the United States, and perhaps 40,000 law enforcement officers. And the police are going to play a major role in the terrorism attacks against our country. Even though that word seems to have fallen out of favor in Washington, we are the subject of, we are targets of terrorists throughout the world. And anyone who is in denial of that, I can't understand. I really, because of my training as police chief, I believe the police should be totally nonpartisan. And as a researcher, I certainly have my own private opinions, but you're not hearing them tonight, and you won't, because I think it detracts from the research that we're talking about. However, when we see the attack in Fort Hood described as a disgruntled member of the military who didn't want to be shipped overseas, this is what we used to call lying. Now the media what the media now calls putting the spin on things. I don't know why, but the media still calls me for a lot of things. And I got a call on Christmas Day to comment on the attempted terrorist attack on an airliner that you've read about, the Northwest airline flight that took off in Amsterdam, and took off in Nigeria, landed in Amsterdam, and almost exploded over Detroit. And I heard Janet Napolitano, who is the head of what many of us in law enforcement refer to as the Department of Homeland Insecurity. And she was the one that said, we're not going to use the nasty word terrorism anymore. We're going to call it a man-made incident, a man-made incident. And then she appeared on television saying that the system worked. And again, this was an isolated experience. However, I didn't do the television interview on Christmas Day because I thought it's got to be an isolated incident. The President of the United States would not be out on the beach in Hawaii if this was linked to Al Qaeda, which shows you how much I know about national politics. But this is quite serious, and I do some serious writing, and about 3 months ago I